This is going to be a key help to tonight, as I have been losing my voice this week. I, as I was saying, I've only been at Rise for a few years. Our new senior guy. So I worked with our old senior minister, Gus Andrews, for 29 years. He started at Lincoln Valley Church of Christ, is the name of it, and then I came in. We came in '93. He started there in '89. We came in '93, and so I worked with him for 29 years. And our new guy, Steve Harley, really strange turn of events, but Steve was serving at the church that Gus Andrews grew up in, and then they actually switched places. Steve came to our church, and Gus went back to Gateway down in St. Albans, West Virginia. Sitting there, and we got to raise our children there. My wife Heather is here with me tonight, and we got to raise our 3 kids. Our oldest daughter is Hannah. She's 28 years old. Our son Caleb just got married back in July. Actually got to do the wedding at the Biltmore in Asheville, North Carolina. And if you're familiar with wedding, etiquette, the bride, I found out our son and his wife had bought their first home. I was really excited because they had been talking about moving to Tampa, Florida. So I was like, sweet. So where's the house at? And they said it's in Brentwood. I was like, we already have a place in Nashville. Like we don't need another house in Nashville. And so, but they have their first home. And then our youngest daughter, Hope, she is a pediatric oncology nurse at Children's Hospital. We all gave the same resource, a book called The Anxious Generation. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I found The Anxious Generation and all that stuff. But man, it's been a blessing. I got to hear the message that Jason preached, and then the one that Gabe preached last week. I'm very grateful, Dave, that you called me at the beginning of the year and invited me to this special program to help parents guide their children in navigating the real world around us today. I heard Gabe mention that he may have regretted dreaming of being a deacon in the church when you were younger. And I have to tell you honestly, Gabe, and Jason said something in the first Sunday evening about was it about discipling the kids or disciplining the kids? And I was thinking about something with you, Gabe, but I want to just ask you to please add my name to the list of people around you that watched you grow and are so very proud of the man that you've become. David already mentioned I've been at Rise many years, but we started a program at Rise a few years back when Steve Harley first took over the role of senior minister, and he called it the Preaching Summit, and it encourages young men who have never preached and want to give it a shot. No judgment. They just want to give it a shot. And this program reminds me so dearly of the Gap preaching camp that you and our son Caleb used to go to. Heather, we were saying on the way up that the first year, I know I remember this just a little bit differently, but the first year, Caleb was so mad at us for making him go to the preacher boy camp. And she said every other year since he gladly chose to go. But and some of you guys have probably been a part of that as well. And Gabe, I've enjoyed watching the relationship that you and our son Caleb had growing up through that week at camp. Watching these last 2 Sunday sermons, hearing you both talk about your family, I'm reminded of a statement I heard one time that said, ministers' kids will do one of 2 things. You'll either spend time in prison or you're going to go into full-time ministry. And some are just lucky enough to be able to do both. And so anyway, again, I'm glad to be here with you this evening. And I have been blessed to be a part of, for many years, the Licking Valley Church of Christ. And then just like a few years ago, we changed our name to Rise Christian Church. And I was so excited to be able to be a part of that name change. Rise identifies us with the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it also more closely identifies us with the restoration movement in the way that we do baptisms. The death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ as we symbolize in baptisms. And so I've been really grateful to be a part. So anyway, the connection that I've been asked to make over these next two Sunday evenings is to help our kids navigate life in a screen-saturated world. That was the title, I believe. And so I just want to just start by making one thing very clear. You know, I've watched and I have heard over the years, like I did 25 years of children's and student ministry at the church. And I've heard exasperated parents say, you know, I've tried to get my kids to go to your church, but I just cannot convince them. And you know that you cannot make your kids go to church like this, but instead we encourage our kids to go like this or like this, right? You can't push your children into the church if you're not also going yourself. And so this is the thing I wanted. Is that my microphone popping? Is it it just kind of, I hear it back behind me there, but anyway. Well, this is the same message that I'm going to share with you the next two evenings of this seminar. So there's one book besides, I already mentioned this book, besides the Bible that I want to encourage you with here over the next couple weeks. If you decide to get this book, I do want to give you a warning that Jonathan Haidt wrote the book, The Anxious Generation. He is not a Christian man, and I'm a movie spoiler, right? So I want to know, like, I got to hear the good news here and stuff. I get goosebumps thinking about this, but even though Jonathan Haidt, and he's a self-proclaimed, in the book, he'll tell you that he is not a believer in Jesus Christ. But he encourages, and one of the things we're going to talk about here tonight is that he encourages involvement in the church as a way to get out of this anxiety and depression that so often that screen use, overuse leads us to. This may sound like a weird connection, but we recently moved into our new building in 2016, or on November 16th of this year. We moved into our last building in 2004, and when we built the new building in 2004, we had these chimes, these beautiful chimes installed in our building, and it was not like a real bell like what you guys have, but and they were beautiful. You could play different hymns and things like that. And so anyway, the man that installed these bells for us, he was just kind of giving us some advice on how we might best use them. He said this is gonna be a shock to the neighborhood. And so he said, my recommendation would be you have a bell go off at 9 o'clock, at 12, at 3 o'clock, at 6 p.m. He said, because even the pagans will appreciate knowing what time it is, right? And so it made me laugh. But so when I think about Jonathan Haidt in this book, The Anxious Generation, even the pagans will look to the church for help on how to properly raise our kids. I think about that with our mission, Hippo Valley. So I have a connection with Dave, but I also have a connection with Miss Emily. But I was thinking of you when I said 2016, because that was when you and I went to Zimbabwe together. I'd been praying for a few years that I wanted the Lord to send me on an international mission trip in 2016. I don't know why I chose that year. But I chose that year, and I've just been praying that God would send me on an international. I had imagined that I might go to Haiti, as we had friends and family in the church that were missionaries in Haiti. I get a call from Emily, and she said, Jeff, I wanted to see, have you ever thought about going to Africa? And I said, Emily, I've never in my life thought about going to Africa. However, I think that your call is an answer to a prayer that I've been praying for multiple years now. And but one of my favorite memories when we were in Zimbabwe is we had the chance, and I don't know how often this happens. It seems very rare to me, but we happened to be in the same school that one of your sponsored children was at. And this has been a lot of years ago now, so I don't know whether you still have contact with that child or not. But anyway, Emily Emily was so excited, and we were handing out shoes and uniforms and things. And so she said, I would love to give the uniform and the shoes to our sponsored child. And what was his name? He had a Henry. She said, Henry, I'm your American sponsor. And he looked so confused, and he said, Dave Jones? Like that? Dave Jones? And so, anyway, but here's why I say that is because even the pagans will trust the church to take care of the kids. In Zimbabwe, Africa, the government had given rights to property for Hippo Valley Christian Mission to build schools because they knew that the mission was going to build an excellent school and was going to take incredible care of the children there. And so even the pagans want to know what time it is, and even the pagans will trust the church. And so I think about that when I think about this book from Jonathan Haidt. But I do want to encourage you, if this is something you're interested in, the book is an incredible book. However, there are some other books that just led me on this journey. So I want to just talk about these real quick too. Tom Rainer. Tom Rainer is a research guru and genius. He has so many connections that Tom Rainer can send out. I want to find out what the pulse of the church is, and he can send out one message, and he can get like 500,000 responses in no time at all, and that's pretty good research. This has been my life the last 3 years as I've been getting my master's degree. Research is hard to come by sometimes. Tom Rainer seems to do it very easily. He wrote a book, and next week we're going to be talking more about this book, The Anxious Generation Goes to Church. All right, excellent book. And then Claire Haddon wrote a book called The Anxious Generation Parents Guide, and we're going to be talking about this book a lot next week too. But tonight I really want, and then one last book here that I'll recommend to you. But Jonathan Haidt, once again, wrote a book called The Amazing Generation, and this is going to be in response to what he wrote in the first book. How do we get out of this mess that social media and screen-based life has got us into, called The Amazing Generation. I'm going to leave these back at the back there. You can take a picture or whatever. I should have put a QR code like you guys do at the parent resource wall. But anyway, we're raising our children in a time of deep contradiction. Our world in many ways is safer, it's more connected, and it's more technologically advanced than it's ever been before. But at the same time, our children are increasingly more anxious, more lonely, and more overwhelmed. And one of the most difficult things I see about this is that we are asking our kids all over again, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to emotional issues, we're asking our children all over again. If any of you have young children and you say, what hurts? Tell daddy what hurts. Tell mommy what hurts, right? And if it's a physical hurt, they can point to a place on their body. It's my belly hurts, my elbow hurts, you know. When it comes to mental and emotional health, we're asking our kids all over again, tell me what hurts. And with emotional health, this is a very difficult thing for us to identify sometimes. It sounds silly maybe, but I'll talk with a lot of men. I've been blessed to be overwhelmed with counseling. That probably sounds like a backwards compliment there. There's a lot of people that are hurting in our communities, in our churches, and I have a lot of men that they'll say like I'm angry or I'm anxious, and I have a really cool graph called the anger iceberg. And so anger is at the top, and then it's like, but tell me some of the words on the picture below that describe how you feel right now. Because even as adults, it's hard for us to describe emotional hurt. And so we're asking our children again to answer that question. Tell me what hurts. Point at it. Tell me where your hurt actually is. And so when we talk about anxiety, when we talk about loneliness, when we talk about sadness, it may be more difficult to know what to point to. I love Jason's point 2 Sundays ago when he mentioned that time helps us to build the relationship and the rapport, etc. And so you may be there asking, you may be saying, well, what about me? So, yes, I understood I should have started investing in my children long ago. But so now here we are struggling in the way that we're struggling. I feel like this every time that I hear a Dave Ramsey or some other financial planner, and he said, you should have been saving long ago. Like, yeah, okay, that's good. I appreciate that, but I did not. And so where do I start now? Do I just give up? And the answer is no, don't just give up. All right? We're gonna start investing now. And this is why we have things like this, is to encourage you. This is why we have the church. And Gabe, I loved how just sincere you are to say the church is how to fix things, right? And I agree with that too myself. I loved hearing your message from last Sunday, Gabe, and I applaud you for beginning and plugging in, not only to your own children, but plugging into other children and families of the church as well. And I also happen to know from your spiritual upbringing that much of what your parents poured into you is now a significant part of your life and the dreams that you have for your future as parents as well. Emily, I got to see Emily grow up as well, and I love to see the two of you raising your beautiful daughter. And I loved how you made the announcement so broad on your sermon on YouTube. It was YouTube official. But let's talk about this a little bit together. And we don't have to mention the 5 things that you did as a young person, but I want to kind of like back and forth. I want to go through the sheet that I provided here. Let's just kind of shoot some things out here. I want to talk about the difference between your childhood and things that your children or children that you know are going through now. Shoot some things out. What's something that you did in your childhood? That you rode a bike. How far did you ride the bike? Do you live? Are you rural?
Oh, it was just always around the teeny tiny little Frank Haven.
Okay.
Lots of miles just within the loop.
Excellent. Wore those tires out, man, and those pedals. Riding a bike. Yes, perfect. What are some things you did as children? Sandlot baseball. There's a really cool video. Well, it's not cool. Heather was explaining to me this really great video, and I was thinking, why did you waste your time watching that video? There's a funny video. And I'm gonna probably just like generational. I don't know if there's a generationalism or whatever. I'm gonna like blast all the generations. But this guy was a millennial, and he was like, "You guys, I hear you guys talking about drinking out of the water hose. Why'd you drink out of the water hose? Why didn't you just go inside and get a drink inside?" Anyone know the answer to that? We weren't allowed inside. Yeah, we weren't allowed inside that house. Once you went out in the morning, and mom might even like put a sandwich out on the porch or something, but you weren't even allowed to come back in for a bite for lunch. Yeah, so that's a different thing, right? Anyone else? Just shoot a couple of things else out about your. Say again. Climbing trees. Building a fort. Excellent. Playing in the creek. Hunting and fishing. Playing with the neighborhood kids. Now, how about some common activities in either your child's life or that you see children doing nowadays? Video games. Anyone know any of the names of the video games? Minecraft? Pac-Man. There's some of the things, and I'm gonna in my manuscript. I'm like asking. I'm dating myself. You just saying Pac-Man. You just dated yourself here. Now there is a thing about Minecraft that John Haidt talks about, because there's a difference between consuming and creating, and there is an aspect of, especially for neurodivergent kids, that things like Minecraft and some of those things where you're creating new spaces and stuff that are very, very helpful to helping with the brain. So, yeah, that's good. Those are also great. Now, see, even in a pretty rural area, and I'm not trying to I grew up just outside of Chicago, and so, but I remember, and so I look at, I remember, have memories based on where we lived, and so I remember this. I was out riding my bike in a strange neighborhood, and there was kind of a retaining wall that had, and it kind of like came. What it didn't really come up. The sidewalk was going down, but my pedal got locked on that retaining wall, and I like bit it. Like I wiped out hard, and we still lived on Cherry Street, so that meant that I would have been first grade or younger, right? And so this is kind of the like the wild memories that we have of like why would my mom let me ride my bike in a strange neighborhood at first grade, But it's kind of the but so anyway, these are great. Even in the rural areas like this, where tradition guides a lot of what you do, and there's still a lot of generational impact. Our lives as adults and the lives of our children are markedly different. So Jonathan Haidt argues that we have unintentionally. He said two things happened that are causing this this rewiring of our youth's brains. He said we've unintentionally overprotected children in the physical world, and we have underprotected them in the digital world. Those are the two steps that we have made terribly awry that have led to this. Now we got to ask the question too. There's a really great part in Claire Haddon's book, the Parents Guide, where she says, "Is it we might say the chicken or the egg, the cause or the effect? Like, did that really cause that, or was it just a part of the reason that we struggle now with bad emotional health because of all this stuff?" But anyway, overprotection in the physical world, underprotection in the digital world. And so this message is not meant to blame. I want this message to just kind of like awaken responsibility, because if we understand what has changed, we can begin to change it. And so from a biblical perspective, this imbalance touches on something way deeper than behavior. It touches on the formation of the heart, on the mind, and the soul. Scripture reminds, Gabe, you shared this passage last week on Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and even when he is older, he will not depart from it. See, we're not merely raising children, we're shaping disciples. I love the shirts that I've seen some women wearing that say "raising believers," right? We're raising believers. We're forming character. We're stewarding lives that were entrusted to us by God. Jonathan Haidt talks about the great rewiring of childhood. For generations, childhood, just like we talked about, was built on play. It was built on exploration. It was built on relational development, gradual independence. When children learn through embodied experience, like running and climbing trees, we mentioned, riding bikes, resolving conflict on our own, navigating the risks, and discovering our own capabilities by exploring the world firsthand. And he says over the past 15 to 20 years, something fundamental has shifted. Children today, Jonathan Haidt says, children today are growing up in what he calls a phone-based childhood rather than a play-based childhood. And today, much of that has been replaced by screen-centered existence. So instead of face-to-face relationships, we have digital interaction. I was just talking about this with somebody. So my license as a counselor, this is really cool. And every time I say this, so people kind of get up like, where you can, so an Ohio license is part of a multi-state compact, and so I could practice in some other state besides just Ohio. And people that are close to me, like, where are you going? You can't leave, like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just saying, like, I have the ability to practice social work in another state other than Ohio. Why would it gets very defensive in this, but anyway, we even go back to that, even doing telehealth. Gus Andrews, our old senior minister, he'd always say, why would you take a drunk back to the bar? If the screen is part of what's causing the anxiety and the depression, why would you meet with someone on a telehealth call when you could meet with him in person. My preference by far is to meet face to face. But so again, this is what we're doing though. Instead of face-to-face friendships, we're using digital interaction. Instead of outdoor play, we're doing video games or indoor screen time. Instead of independent exploration, we have to have constant supervision. Instead of risk-taking and resilience, we have curated safety and supervision. We always talked about helicopter parents, right? Now it's like drone parents or, whatever. I mean, we've got so much other technology besides helicopters. We're way better at stalking our children than a helicopter parent. So anyway, that shift did not happen overnight. It came gradually through the rise of smartphones, through social media platforms, and a culture emphasis on safety above all else. He mentions 2009. He mentions 2009 when the phone came out, and I remember 2009. I'm like, was that really when this happened? Is the internet and handheld devices are fairly recent. So I just said this didn't happen overnight, but it kind of did. I mean, this really has blasted us quickly. But he says 2009 when Apple did the front-facing camera, right? And this is when I started looking at myself more often. I got a buddy, he's actually a minister, and we went out to lunch the other day, and the food got delivered to our table, and he said, "Phone eats first," and he snapped a picture of his food. I was like, "Brad, what are you doing?" Like, he said, "Oh, phone eats first. My phone eats first. I got to show people what I'm eating." Like, my goodness, like, are you in middle school? Again, no offense to middle schoolers. Yes. But yeah, so Jonathan Haidt talks that this is 2009 when all of this really kind of like really hit hard, all right? The rise of smartphones, social media platforms, culture emphasis on safety above all else. But the consequences have been profound. We see rates of anxiety and depression. We see rates of self-harm and suicidal ideation have risen sharply, especially among adolescents and even more so among young girls. And this is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. The first time I really remember talking about this, so I got the blessing of teaching with a program. We have a pro-life agency in Newark and in Zanesville called Heartbeats. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Heartbeats. I got to teach. I started back to school, and so they gave me just shy of 1 semester shy of 30 years I taught with Heartbeats in the high schools and middle schools. And I remember when all this started happening. And so even though we're supposed to be talking about sexual purity, I'm like, listen, I'm not talking about sex today because I think there's something much deeper that we need to talk about. And I started talking about social media a long time ago because I felt like we're wrecking the foundation of relationships by all of this stuff that we're doing by going to our phones instead of having face-to-face interactions. I remember a time when our son and I wept over this. He's having a little issue. Of course, now, life is good. He's married and, has a beautiful home and all this stuff. But I remember a girl that he was dating, and we loved this girl. Like, I thought this is going to be our daughter-in-law. And he said, "Dad, Hannah and I had a fight and stuff." And I'm like, go talk to her. "Oh, no, she doesn't like to talk in person." "Whatever, man, go take her out to dinner and you get this thing figured out." "No, we're just texting." Like, okay, listen, this is not the right way to do this, but this is when all of this started happening, is when we thought we could take care of issues by texting instead of, and I don't know about you, but when I text somebody, like, do you know how I really feel in this text? Could you misconstrue what I'm saying in this text, right? And that's easy to do. We talk a lot this is another reason why I prefer face-to-face sessions with a client, is because there's a lot of nonverbal stuff, body language, et cetera, that's happening that you don't even get in a Zoom call or whatever, but let alone a text call. And so anyway, like I said, this is a pattern, and this shift has quietly rewired. And I started to say this at the beginning. This is not just about our children. I think this is directly affecting us as well. I did I just jotted down some things here. So he talks about the anxious generation, and he pinpoints two generations that he specifically talks about in the anxious generation. That's Gen Z and Generation Alpha. I just want to go through like the generational breakdowns. Okay, so we have the greatest generation. This is 1901 to 1927. Then from 1920 to 1945, that was called the silent generation. Boomers are 1946 to 1964. Generation X is 1965 to 1980. Millennials is 1981 to 1996. Our preacher Steve this morning said, it hurts when it gets this close to home. And this is where our kids were born in Generation Z, 1997 to 2012. And then Gen Alpha from 2013 to the mid-2020s. And we can say that the anxious generation are those two younger generations, but the reality is it affects us too. One of the things that set me on this journey was actually a book called Redeeming Your Time. Rayner is his name. And so this guy Rayner, Jordan Rayner, really likes an author. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a guy named John Mark Comer. John Mark Comer wrote a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I should have just given a resource sheet and just said, buy all these books, because you'll be happy. But Redeeming Your Time, this was the first book that I read this year. Let me tell you how getting rid of social media has impacted my life. I'm just a few pages from finishing. Tonight in bed, I'll finish the 7th book that I've read this year. You know, there's lots of years, actually every other year besides this year, that I've not read 7 books in a whole year, let alone by mid-April. And the reason, social media for me was not. Well, I guess it's going to be kind of dependent on how you think about sinful activity. Corrie ten Boom, who's an incredible. She lived during the World War II. She was an incredible missionary, and. But anyway, Corrie ten Boom said, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. If the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. I'm going to tell you what social media was for me. It was a time waster. I'd sit on, and I'm not saying all this to shame anybody, but just to awaken awareness here. But I'm finishing 7 books tonight before I fall asleep. And it's because I'm not spending 45 minutes scrolling through watching guys turn wood on a lathe. Like, that's my favorite stuff, is turning wood on a lathe, or like CNC machines where they're doing the same thing, but just they got metal. Please. Thank you. Sorry about that. So it was a time waster. And this is how much social media affects all of us. It's not just these kids. It's not just the Gen Z and Gen Alpha. It's all of us that it affects. And like I said, the shift has quietly rewired. There certainly is something about the vulnerable, undeveloped brain in the younger generations, and that there is a true statement about that. However, and I know I've got it in my notes, I'm going to just say it right now. We always have talked about the development of the frontal lobe at 25, and research now, science is now showing that it's actually much later than that. The brain, the decision-making element of the brain is not fully developed until later on in life, 30 more, and I think part of it has to do with, video games and social media and stuff. But part of it is, then this is like the critical thinking part of our brains. Certainly the more vulnerable generations are facing a much tougher result of what's happening with social media stuff. And Scripture affirms the importance of having embodied, lived experience. Psalm 34:8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good." You see, faith itself is not meant to be purely abstract. It's meant to be lived. It's meant to be experienced. and embodied. On page 2 of the sheet here, Jonathan Haidt identifies 4 core developmental needs. I mean, remarkably, these things align closely with biblical principles of growth and maturity. And I just kind of want to give you a couple of seconds here. Let me talk about these real quick. So the first one that Jonathan Haidt describes is unstructured play and joy. Our children need freedom to play. They need freedom to imagine. They need freedom to create. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 4, there's a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And our children need that time. They need time to play freely. They need time without adult direction. They need time without mom and dad being like, oh, baby, be careful. You know, they need that time to express and break bones. Break bones. They need time to learn social negotiation. They need to learn how to practice risk assessment. They need to be able to look at the tree and be like, is this really a good idea for me or not, right? And then they climb it anyway. That's how we learned, right? That's how we learn. And so, and they need time to learn to build creativity and problem-solving skills. When every moment's structured, it's supervised, it's already cultivated, it's optimized, children lose the opportunity to discover themselves. Joy, movement, play are not distractions from development. They are part of God's design for development. And a second thing that they need is gradual independence and responsibility. Children must grow into responsibility over time. Luke 16:10 says, whoever is faithful in very little will be faithful in very much, right? They need that time to learn. Children need increasing levels of freedom as they grow, like walking to a friend's house or riding their bicycle around the thing and managing small responsibilities. Children need levels of freedom to navigate minor challenges. Independence builds confidence. And without it, children will grow older, but not stronger. We talk about, a mile wide, but only an inch deep. This is what we're doing by not allowing our kids to think through some of those things. When we allow children to take small risks, not to the full extent of breaking bones, but when we allow our children to take small risks and responsibilities, we're preparing them for greater trust and stewardship. Number 3, Jonathan Haidt says, embodied living, not disembodied existence. God created us as physical beings, not just minds or images. Children are not meant to live primarily through screens. They need movement. They need physical presence. They need sensory engagement. A life lived digitally is a life disconnected from the body and from reality. A childhood dominated by screens distances children from physical reality that God designed them to inhabit. And then the fourth thing that he says is we need deep, meaningful, face-to-face relationship. True connection that cannot be reduced to likes and comments. When we talk about likes and comments, you're talking about hormonal stuff in the brain that has been compared to a casino, addict pulling the thing. We like these likes and comments. In fact, if we don't get them, we keep checking our screens to see, why didn't somebody respond to this yet? I thought this was a funny joke, and it truly affects our feelings. And I'm talking about kids here, but I'm also talking about myself. Like, I kind of get, chippy too. Like, how come this was a hilarious joke that I just put on my Facebook, but nobody even made a comment about it, So anyway, Hebrews 10:24 and 25 says, let us consider how to spur one another to love and good deeds and not neglecting the meeting together. So we need true connection, all right? Friendships are formed through shared experiences, not just through shared content. Real relationships require eye contact, emotional nuance. We just talked about this, like nonverbal stuff and conflict and repair. One of the things that I get a chance to talk about when we do premarital counseling, one of the questions always comes up, and it's kind of like a cast out there, or like a lob pitch. I just want to see how the answer goes. I just kind of make the statement: conflict is not a good thing in marriage. Agree? Disagree? It's not. Yes. Yes. All right. But so then we got to think about the idea. Well, what does conflict mean? Because if I'm surrounded by yes men all the time, or if my mom tells me all the time, Jeffrey Allen, you are just the greatest, that's not healthy for me in my life, right? And so we need to have conflict and repair. We were so intentional about. The first part seems like this is kind of bad. We were very intentional to let our kids see us argue around them, right? That may seem like, okay, that's great. Yeah, you just did it too, like, maybe not. But we were even more intentional for them to see us make up, right? They have to know. We live in a world right now that says, like, if we don't agree on everything, and I'm not even going to bring up all the things we should agree on because I just make some of you mad if I even mention them, right? And but if we don't agree on everything, then you must hate me. No. We need to make sure that we're cultivating relationships that show, like, hey, listen, we don't see eye to eye on everything, but yet we still are very good friends. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but yet we still are celebrating our 34th year of marriage. And our kids need to see that because that's how they do their own critical thinking when they see mom and dad didn't get along, but they still made up, right? Let's talk about this real quick on this sheet. And I don't want to overdo my time because you gave me 2 nights to talk about this stuff. Perfect. All right. Just take a minute, and I do want you to take these home and work on these. This sheet is not just all for tonight. This is to span into next week as well. But let's just talk about this. Rating a 1 to 5, or maybe put them in. Now rate them 1 to 5. 5 is the strongest. 1 is the least about how you do this in your home. Unstructured play, independence, physical activity, face-to-face relationships. Somebody willing to share what was your strongest area? Physical activity? Why is that? Perfect. Do you ever find the physical activity, the ones you just mentioned, do you ever find them in conflict with your beliefs as a father, as far as like church? I feel bad to even ask you this because I know the answer. Do you ever feel like it's a conflict between sports and church? And how do you? It hasn't been. Good for you. It's the one thing. It's the one reason that I'm glad that we're empty nesters. Because I look at people, we drive past the Licking Valley baseball fields every Sunday morning, 7:45, whatever, and the parking lot's already packed. And I'm like, well, they're going to church somewhere. They're worshiping something. It just doesn't happen to be the Lord. And I get it. Like, it's hard for rural communities like ours to navigate that. So what do? We send out like I love like all the NASCAR preachers and stuff like that. What do? We send a chaplain out with the team. And actually a lot of the kids, because of like, are you guys familiar with LifeWise Academy? You guys know about LifeWise? So many of our kids now in Licking Valley School District are involved in LifeWise. Like, they're saying, hey, coach, let's pray together before the game. And that's a good replacement. I mean, that's a good thing to do on a baseball field on a Sunday morning, but it's not a good replacement for being in church on Sunday morning. And so, good. All right, physical activity was your number 1. Anybody have something different than physical activity as your strongest? Unstructured play? Yeah, no, that's... They hide it well. Yeah. excellent. Unstructured play is excellent because you know what I feel like with the normal response would be like, I'm lazy, I guess, or I'm not lazy. You're not lazy. You're just doing other things, and so I got to do something to keep my children engaged in something else. And you see like a parent, like, and I'll see this. We'll be out at a restaurant, and the child is talking or whatever. Here, take mommy's phone, take daddy's phone, you know. And so for you to choose unstructured play instead of giving them a screen or whatever, and that might be a choice sometimes too. And one of the things that Claire Haddon does in her book in the Parent's Guide, and one of the things that Jonathan Haidt, I haven't read this last book, The Amazing Generation, yet, but I'm guessing that this is what Jonathan Haidt has done, is that he started to give some ideas about like, well, so we're stuck in this social media tailspin. What do we do now? And but a lot of it, and we're going to talk about this a lot more next week too. But co-creating a technology plan, like, all right, so we're going to get a chance to use the phone, or the screen. So maybe not the phone, but we're going to use the screen for a little bit. After your homework is done or whatever, and that becomes part of the reward system. We were talking about like conditioning and rewards and discipline, but anyway, but Claire Haddon talks about that, creating that plan, and there are times when the screen is okay to use, but then there's times when it's like the dinner table. I heard both of you guys talk about non-negotiables. That's a non-negotiable. Like we're at the dinner table. I have a good friend that started this. I don't use social media anymore. So, but he had this little thing that he did called, his name was Chad Yarnelli. I don't know if any of you guys know Chad Yarnelli, but he did this thing called Chad Eats. And so Chad Eats, and he had all these restaurants around Newark that would give you a discount if you mentioned Chad Eats, because his thing was we need to get back around the dinner table. Even if it was in a restaurant, the fact that the family is sitting back together, we're breaking bread together, we're having conversation about the day. And actually, Heather and I ran into Chad one time in a restaurant, and like I thought I was running into a superstar, like, man, this guy. But he and I had that same mindset, like we need to get back around the dinner table. This is where so many of the things, and I heard Jason say week one that he said, we had some successes and we had some failures. Hopefully we had more successes and failures. And I feel like that with Heather and I, there are things that our kids still do, and they're like, hey, let's do highs and lows. What? You're 28 years old, yeah, but I want to tell you about the good thing that happened in my day today. Like, you've been waiting all day so you could tell mom and dad. You've been waiting this whole year since last Thanksgiving to tell your mom and dad about something really cool that happened. You want to do highs and lows, right? And but the dinner table is a non-negotiable, right? Claire Haddon would say that too in that book, but anyway. All right, anyone else have another place that you marked that was not physical activity or unstructured play? In those four, that was your highest rated. Independence? How old are your children? 14. Okay. How do you feel about that, giving independence to a 14-year-old? Yes, yeah. One of the things that I started asking when I would see kids in the school, and I'm going to talk about this later too. The schools need to pitch in on this. The church needs to set the standard on this, but families are where all of this begins, right? As the family, all of this begins in the home. I always say we can't lose home field advantage. You have a place to speak into your child's ears and heart that nobody else has. Anyway, I used to ask this question whenever I see kids in the high school and elementary or middle schools with their phones. When your mom and dad gave you that phone, and I always was like a smart aleck. Man, they must really think a lot of you. They gave you this incredible freedom that they gave you a cell phone. And then I say, do you look at it as freedom or as a leash? And every time, it's a leash. That's why mom and dad gave me this phone. It's a leash. They just want to know. They want to be able to contact me whenever they want to contact me. I'm like, are you kidding? They just gave you. Of course, now they weren't $1,000, handheld computers then. But like your parents gave you a cell phone, and you think of it as a leash. They gave you this incredible. So independence, great. Especially, is that the only child you have, or that's your youngest? Okay. Okay. One last question I want to ask, and this is this action step that we can do this week. But I want to give you caution. One of the things that I feel like we often do, like we go to a conference or we go to a seminar or we go to a thing, and it's like, oh, I want to try all the things. I want to try all the things. And so we come back and we just blast our kids with all these different things. I have it in my notes here. I remember every time we had a youth revival, my mom and dad would say, that's it. No more Van Halen, and I did this multiple. I just dated myself. All right, you said Pac-Man earlier. I just said Van Halen, and I did it with all the different. I had all the Van Halen albums, and mom, and it was like we went to the youth revival, like, oh man, Satan music, whatever. So we cried. All of them, and then later on I was like, well, I'll get the cassettes, and so then I had every Van Halen cassette, and we went to the youth revival, and like, no more Van Halen, broke them all, pulled the, this is how you ruin a cassette, and then I had every CD, every Van Halen CD, and so don't go and be like, that's it. In fact, Claire Haddon says that they call this psychological reactance, and it's like going cold turkey on some addiction that you have. Imagine, I remember giving up coffee, and I actually 4 years I hadn't had any caffeine, and my buddy and I did end up going to Haiti. It was actually the year after we went to Zimbabwe together, and all week long I just had this terrible headache. This is the first time I really had not had any caffeine, and Jenny, our guide, she kept saying, Jeff, I can go into town and find some coffee. No, I'm fine. I'm okay. Had a splitting headache, and so anyway, we get back into Port-au-Prince, and we're getting ready to fly out, and the flight attendant came by. She said, would you like anything to drink? Yes, coffee, black, right now. Like I hadn't even, but it's like that. Anytime you they call it psychological reactance. Your children are going to 100%, they're going to, mutiny on you if you say, all right, that's it, no more cell phones. We know how bad cell phones are now and stuff. Figure out a way to co-create a plan with them on how, and even say like things like, I noticed that after you watch a video, you kind of seem a little angry. What's your anger about? And mine is I just wasted 45 minutes and like, oh shoot, I can't believe now I'm late for this thing. I just told you earlier about John Mark Comer's Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I realized, because I'm just going to bring this thing around. So we talked about anger and anxiety earlier. Neither anger or anxiety are a primary emotion. Those are secondary emotions, which means, and actually another great psychologist has said that those are like the smoke detectors. Anxiety and anger are like the smoke detectors saying like, hey, listen, warning, 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 something else is going wrong in your life. And after I read John Mark Comer's book, because I'm terrible at self-care. I'm terrible at Sabbath, and I know Sabbath is not just a recommendation by the Lord. That's a commandment from the Lord. And but I found that when I had stopped hurrying everywhere, when I stopped procrastinating, when I stopped wasting 45 minutes on the toilet looking at someone wood turning a wooden bowl, that my anxiety and my anger dropped considerably. And this has been the most should I have said toilet in the church? Okay. This has been the most peaceful 8 weeks of my life since I got rid of those things. And anyway, and it's going to help you as you raise your children as well. We did a program called The Power of Positive Parenting. And this was scientifically proven, empirical evidence, all this stuff that if you just do these things and say these things with your children, it's going to change. When we came home and started talking about some of these things with our kids, it was almost like the Jedi mind trick thing. They looked at us like, "What did you just do?" And stuff. But it worked. And so anyway, I'm telling you, pray about this. Think about some of the elements as you go through that sheet this week, don't wait for me. As you go through that sheet this week and think about some of those things, start praying about how you can incorporate some of these things into the life of your family and your home, and some boundaries that you can set with your children and with your own selves too, because this is not just going to affect your children, it's going to affect your heart too. And so my goodness, I'm so grateful to be here tonight, and I hope this doesn't just sound like ramblings. I'm excited to be back here with you next Sunday evening. So anyway, would you pray with me? Gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the example that the church has set, that even the pagans recognize that there's some good in that. Even a self-proclaimed atheist like this man, Jonathan Haidt, that had the sense to write a book about the anxious generation and then encourage people to get involved in church as a way to get out of it. God, I just thank you so much that you give us a time like this with brothers and sisters. And Lord, we thank you for the way that you love us. We thank you for the way that you care for us, the way that you lead us and guide us. And Lord, I pray that you encourage us in this hour. Lord, we love you, and we thank you. And Lord, we pray all these things in the precious and powerful name of Jesus. Amen.